Hello and welcome back to the Rockets on Call podcast. This is episode 5 of season 2. And in this episode, I was accompanied by Dr. David Pearson, a medical physicist with his PhD and certification from the American Board of Radiology. He is an associate professor at the University of Toledo College of Medicine, the program director for the medical physics residency, and associate dean for admissions and strategic enrollment. Another wonderful episode. Dr. Pearson provides a wealth of knowledge and insight into medical physics, its career pathway, and recent advancements within the field. Additionally, Dr. Pearson's position as the Associate Dean of Admissions permits us an inside account into how admissions committees make their decisions. Finally, Dr. Pearson also discussed the new radiation therapy undergraduate degree now offered here at the University of Toledo. So without further ado, we thank Dr. Pearson again for joining us, who is nothing short of an amazing guest. And I hope you can see that by listening to this episode, so please enjoy. All right, and we're recording. So how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Doing good. So with most of our guests, I usually like to start all the way back at the beginning. So kind of prior to your undergrad, sort of transitioning into that. Because what did you major in for undergrad prior to doing, your doctoral in
Yeah,
medical
so
physics?
kind of an interesting story. I have had University of Toledo as part of my education through all points from undergraduate. So I actually did 1 year of an exchange program here in Toledo. And after doing a year here, I decided that I wanted to move here. So I had to go back to the UK to finish my degree at the University of Salford, which is where we have an active exchange program. That program's still going on today. You can be a UT biology student. I think there might be some more programs now, but yeah, biology is the big one. I came over here with physics and did 1 year of my exchange, went back, finished my degree in the UK, and then decided to apply to graduate school. So did graduate school here, did my PhD. Took a long time. It's for the program that I did, it's kind of inefficient, but that's because it's not only giving you the normal PhD in physics type classes, but also it's preparing you for the career that I chose, which was medical physics. And so I ended up having to do quite a few medical physics classes on top of all the requirements for the regular PhD in physics. But their program here is CAMPEP accredited, and that's a big deal. That means that you can walk out of that degree program and be qualified to do the next step of training, which is residency. I was able to do everything here at the University of Toledo. Before I graduated with the PhD, a clinical job became available in the Department of Radiation Oncology, and so I applied for that job. I wasn't actually the top guy for the job. I think I was like the second person, but the first guy turned it down, and so lucky me, I got the job. And so I started working over in the Dana Cancer Center. Actually, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't the Dana Cancer Center at the time. It was the radiation therapy. It was in the basement of the hospital. So I started my first real job in the cancer center and loved it. Then was able to finish off my degree while still working. And then once I graduated, the clinical job turned into a faculty position. And so I've worked as a kind of clinical and academic medical physicist ever since then. But yeah, University of Toledo all the way.
That's a great story. So then just backtracking to the beginning, what was physics? Like what precipitated the choice of choosing physics over other, STEM fields?
I was torn between aeronautical engineering and physics and wasn't really sure what the best choice was. Back then, I guess I was thinking more in terms of what is the job that I'm going to do when I graduate with my undergraduate degree. And my thought process, being a kid, being an undergraduate student, it really wasn't the best. I didn't do a lot of research. I figured that if I got a job, if I went and did aeronautical engineering, then I would be an aeronautical engineer, and maybe I'll work for the Air Force or something like that. And if I did physics, I just kind of assumed there was a whole bunch of jobs I could do. It's a degree where you solve problems, and people want to hire people that can solve problems. But I didn't know what those jobs were. And so when I went down the path, I really didn't have a career in mind. I'm just going to do the physics and then see what happens at the end, and I'll be able to solve problems, and people will want to hire me. And that was the only thought that went through my mind choosing physics. It kind of helped that my university gave me a small scholarship to help. So that kind of pushed me in the direction of physics over aeronautical engineering. The aeronautical engineering school that I was looking to go to was pretty competitive, and they weren't going to give me a scholarship. So I chose the physics. And the other thing that kind of pushed me in that direction was that the university that I was thinking of attending also had this exchange program where I would get to go to the US for a year. And so that was really appealing to me. So yeah, I picked physics. I picked the University of Salford, and those were the reasons. Not necessarily the best thought out plan, but for many people, it just kind of worked out because it is a good degree to have, and there are jobs, and even if you don't know what they are, that's okay.
So the Salford exchange program, which is still pretty popular here at the university, how'd you end up doing that? Because did you go into Salford thinking, oh, I know about this exchange program, I want to do that? Or did you kind of just end up, because that's a pretty big transition to go from the UK to the US, and a bit of a culture shock, I imagine.
Yeah, it was, and that was the plan. Yeah, I actually did choose my university in Salford. I chose that partly because of the exchange program. And so, yeah, from the very beginning, I had this plan in my mind that I was going to spend my junior year over here in the US. And I guess I was working to a goal, right? So it kind of made me stay on focus and try to work to get grades because that was something I wanted to do. And I knew that they would only let me do it if I had the academics. They didn't want me to get D's and then come over here and enjoy the lifestyle and then not be able to actually make it through the classes and be sent home in disgrace. So yeah, they had a minimum GPA requirement, and I was working my way towards getting that. So I had a goal for the first few years of undergraduate, working towards spending my third year here.
Gotcha. So then your fourth year comes around, and then because you go straight into the doctoral program, correct?
I did, yeah. So after fourth year comes around, I have to go back to the UK to finish that off. So my final year was back in Salford. And I was looking to find a way to come back to Toledo. There was a girl.
Okay.
I met a girl, and I wanted to come back. There still is a girl, same one. And I wanted to find a way to come back to the US. And the easiest way to do that was to go into a graduate program. So I applied to graduate school. I only applied to one. I just applied to University of Toledo. They accepted me, so I came back, and I was happy to be back here.
How long have you guys been together, if you don't mind me asking?
24 years.
Wow, congratulations. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, we met in January of 2000. I had gone back for winter break, back to the UK, back to see my family. 1999 and 2000 was the year that I was over here. So fall break, 2000, I come back, we have a party. I actually lived downtown off campus so that we could do that kind of thing, and we could have some parties. And, we were all 20, 21 years old. Being on campus didn't seem like the best place to do that. So, yeah, we went off campus, and, she arrived at the party because she was a friend of a friend of a friend. I don't know if anyone knew who she was when she showed up, but, yeah.
It's crazy how it all works out, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So then, what was specifically the application process for the doctoral program, right? Because I'm not too familiar with PhD programs. So are there certain, essays? Is there any kind of standardized testing required, interviews, anything like that along those lines?
Not really, no. I guess the toughest thing about getting into a PhD program is actually doing well at the major that you're applying to. So, for physics, that meant, doing well in physics, having a track record of good grades in physics. So I had a decent GPA. I had specifically a decent GPA in physics, and I think normally I would have needed to take the GRE to apply, but because I was a UT exchange student, they already knew me, right? So I already had the grade. They already knew how I was going to perform. So they accepted me without the GRE. Translating that to today, because of COVID changing everything, very few graduate programs that I'm aware of actually require a GRE now. So at the University of Toledo, you can apply to a PhD program and no GRE is required at this point. So just having the good grades in physics is good enough to get accepted into a physics PhD program.
So GPA is pretty crucial then. It's like the
Yes,
main
yeah.
weight.
Yeah, that's the thing. You've got to show that you're going to succeed. Having research in that area helps, but I think GPA is king.
So then what's the structure like? Because you're doing research and then you also have classes at the same time.
Yeah, it starts off with just classes.
Just classes?
So for the first year or two, your job as a PhD student is to survive all of the PhD classes. And so we get hit with classical mechanics, quantum mechanics, electromagnetism. They're all pretty intense courses, and you have to get through that because before you're officially accepted into the PhD program, you have to pass something called a qualifying exam, which is an exam that covers all of those topics I was just saying. And if you don't pass that exam, then they say, okay, you can close out with a master's degree in physics, but you can't continue on to the PhD. So I think they maybe give you a couple of chances to pass that exam, but you have to pass it. And so you're not really, in the first couple of years in the program, you're not kind of officially there until you've passed that exam. Then after you've done that, you can start to think about what research you're going to work on. I mean, you can think about it earlier, but basically you're not going to be able to start any long-term research projects until they know you're going to be there. And so you have to get through that exam. That's normally done within a year or two of actually starting the program.
So then once you take the qualifying exam, then you can look for research projects.
Then you can start working on research projects, working towards your PhD
Mhm.
thesis, and that's going to take usually 2-3 years on top of the classes that you have to take. So you're looking at five-ish years to do the PhD. And then the track that I chose that gave me that accredited medical physics qualification, that added probably a year and a half to 2 years.
So yeah, that's the other thing. So what's required for accreditation to be a medical physicist? Are there alternate pathways to sort of reach that, or
the straightforward pathway is you need to be a physics major, and then you can move on to either an accredited master's degree program, which the University of Toledo offers, or an accredited PhD program, which again the University of Toledo offers. I chose to go down the PhD track because that was the one that was most available to me. But if I was born in the US and I was looking at, okay, I want to become a medical physicist, what's the most efficient way of doing it? We have a 2-year master's degree that gives you the same qualifications to do that job as the 6-7-year PhD that I did. So the PhD helps me because it allows me to become a professor here. But to do the job, the clinical job, you just need a master's degree from an accredited program. So UT has everything we need.
Gotcha. So, and then just to backtrack a little bit back into your PhD, what kind of research did you focus on? Like, what was your thesis sort of surrounded?
So I actually didn't start off working in medical physics. I came across that a little bit later on. I started working on magnetic thin films, which is kind of the coating of a hard drive, physical hard drives. And there was a couple of things that didn't really appeal to me about that. One was I was not sure what was going to happen after I graduated. I was going to have a PhD and specialize in thin films for hard drives. And even back then, it kind of looked like magnetic hard drives were going to die off. And so I would be specialized in something that I wasn't sure was going to, pay the rent. I also know that to go into academic physics, you have to do multiple training programs called postdocs. So you graduate and then you become a postdoc. That's when you really do a lot of your real solid research to build up your portfolio before you get a professor position. And that also didn't appeal to me. The idea of maybe moving from place to place, getting jobs where you're not paid particularly well to do research with the hope that you're going to become a physics professor, which frankly also they don't get paid that great either. So I really didn't have a plan. Again, there was a reason I was here. It was because of the girl, and I needed to find a way of being here. And so it was a PhD in physics. I started to get more of a plan together once I found out about medical physics. And I had been a PhD student for like 2 years before I started to seriously look at the alternatives, different things I could do. And I went to what was at the time the Medical College of Ohio and spoke to a professor over there, and they said, yeah, you can finish your PhD here. So you can be a student over on the health science campus. You'll still be part of the PhD program, but your thesis research will be done here, and then you'll graduate and you'll be able to become a medical physicist. And I didn't really know exactly what that meant or what the job really was about. But I started to realize that that was what I wanted to do. So that was the best decision I ever made, was, quitting my research and finding an alternative, and then finding that the alternative was something that was really good.
So what was the research focus on once you did transition into the medical physics side of it?
My PhD was on a technology called flattening filter free. And it's something that's built into modern linear accelerators, but it wasn't at the time. So the project that I was working on was to actually investigate whether it was feasible to treat patients with this technology. And that technology, we developed it here at the University of Toledo. My advisor at the time actually patented that work. So University of Toledo actually has a patent in this technology, and it's used in every modern treatment accelerator very prominently. It's not something that's buried in the background. If you are someone that knows about radiation therapy, you'll recognize that this is something that has changed the field, and that was something we worked on here. So I'm pretty proud of being involved with that, but I think it's also cool to realize that there is groundbreaking research happening here in Toledo, and it's affecting patients around the world.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the field alone has, contributed to the lives of hundreds of millions of people with modern imaging techniques and treatment methods. So it's sort of foundational to medicine when you think about it.
Yeah. Especially, I decided to go into the therapy side of things. I had a choice of going into the imaging side, working with CT and MRI and things like that. I decided to go down the therapy road because that just sounded more interesting to me, that I would be able to help treat patients. And I also have the ability to get involved and actually talk to patients, like we're not entirely working in the background. So that was appealing to me. And so, yeah, I chose the therapy side and going into medical physics with specialty in radiation therapy.
So what's kind of the day-to-day like for that?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, it's a little bit different depending on where you work. And I'll just concentrate on the radiation therapy side of it, because I'm not really an expert in what the day-to-day job is for a diagnostic imaging medical physicist. But in radiation therapy, we work we're kind of like supervisors of quality control, I guess is the way I'd like to think about it. We're kind of involved in all aspects of safety of using the radiation. We're involved in the design of the treatment plans for the patients, either actively doing them ourselves or kind of supervising the process and making sure that the treatment plans that patients get is safe. So by treatment planning radiation therapy, I'm talking about like the beams of radiation that come down onto the patient and treat the patient's cancer usually. And so we're the ones like figuring out how to do that quite often, or again, we're supervising the process. So there's that side of it. You're directly affecting patients' treatments. You're involved in making the treatment, making sure that the organs around the tumor are not being exposed to too much radiation, making sure that you're doing the best treatment that you possibly can. Once the treatment is designed, then we have radiation therapists who deliver that treatment, and then our job is to make sure that that's actually being done. So once the plan is approved by our physician, we want to make sure that the treatment delivery is accurate. So we look at records. Our machine, everything it does is recorded in a medical record and stored in the patient's chart. So we go through those records to make sure the machine is exactly where it's supposed to be, doing what it's supposed to be doing, delivering the right treatment to the patient, that the patient is being imaged appropriately, they're getting the right amount of radiation dose, that the images are good, the patient's in the correct position underneath the beam of radiation. So we're looking at all of that every week, going over patients' records to verify that they're getting the treatments that we want them to get. And then finally, we're also very much involved in making sure the machines themselves are safe. So we do testing on the machines to make sure they're, again, delivering the right amount of radiation, that all parts of the machine are actually working as designed. So it's all those kind of testing and monitoring of patient records and working on those treatment designs. Those are the kind of the three big things that we're actively involved in, and so that's kind of our bread and butter day-to-day job.
Gotcha. And then, is there much difference between a medical physicist in the academic setting versus the private sector, or
A little bit.
a little bit?
Basically, you have some additional responsibilities. You'll still do the same job that you were trained to do, but in addition, you'll also be teaching people how to do it. So I think that's really cool for me. I get to do the clinical side of things, but in addition, I also get to teach it. So I teach in a graduate program and a residency program. So I do a lot of hands-on practical training. So not all of that teaching that I do is kind of in a classroom. A lot of the teaching I do is working with residents, working with students. So I find that really appealing. I think the job, I mean, I do like the job of being a medical physicist, but to be honest, the bit that I find the best is the teaching and academic side of it. And academic medical physicists can also get involved in the research, so making those improvements to patients' treatments. That's really cool. It's difficult to do all of those things, right? You've got the clinical job, you've got the teaching, you've got the research. Most of us are not good at all of those things. So my specialty is more of the teaching side and the clinical side, but others could be less interested in teaching or more interested in research. But we all have to do some of the work in the clinic, and that's kind of what pays our bills.
So, did you sort of stumble into the teaching aspect of it, or was that something you kind of thought about doing at a certain point?
I was exposed to teaching for the first time as a PhD student. So you might remember, as a student, you get assigned a graduate assistant who is either helping you in lab, or they're helping you in recitation section, helping you with your homework. And I actually did like that. I kind of enjoyed the teaching side. So I did find it enjoyable, but I wasn't committed. I wasn't like, okay, I'm definitely going to become a teaching professor. That's really what I want to do. I was interested early on in the clinic side. And I found that fascinating, and it's kind of evolved. I kind of started off with clinical work, then started to do a little bit of teaching, then did more teaching. I now do less clinical stuff, more teaching, but I could go either way, really.
Gotcha. So then, as a medical physicist, are you often working in oncology teams then? Because predominantly it's a lot of radiation therapy for oncology patients, correct? In terms of the
Yeah.
therapy side?
Yes. So most of the patients that we treat in the radiation therapy department are cancer patients. But that's not always the case. We treat a whole bunch of variety of things. We're treating arthritis. We're treating a condition called Dupuytren's contracture, which is where your hand starts to curl up and your fingers start to bend inwards. So that's a condition that we can treat. There's literally all sorts of things that radiation is beneficial for, especially in older patients. But the main focus of radiation therapy is cancer patients, and so we treat pretty much every type of cancer you can think of. And I think there's a misconception that cancer is always going to end in someone dying, and that's not always the case. We one of the one of the things that we say in radiation therapy, well, I guess in medicine in general, is that most men will die with prostate cancer, but not of prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is an example of a cancer that's very common in men, but it doesn't kill everybody. Like, there are more aggressive types, and there are patients that get caught too late. But for the vast majority of prostate cancer patients, we can help in such a way that they will never have to really worry about the cancer again. And they're more likely to die of normal old age than actually of the cancer. And that's an example, but that's also true of a number of different cancers.
So, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges right now for the field? Sort of a broad question, I guess, but
I would say that there's the biggest challenge that we face right now is a shortage of people with my specialty specifically. Obviously, it takes many people to make the radiation therapy machine work. We have radiation therapists, we have radiation oncologists, we have medical physicists. There's a number of other jobs that are essential to make a department like that tick. And right now we're facing a lack in a number of fields, but radiation therapists, the people that treat the patients, was one of them, specifically in this area, but also nationally. But one of the things that's most affected me is a lack of people in medical physics. Almost everywhere is hiring. You jump on LinkedIn and you'll find a whole bunch of jobs for medical physicists that are unfilled. And of course, when you have an entire career where there's a shortage of people, the places that are going to feel it the hardest, the places that are going to be hit the hardest are the locations where they're slightly less desirable places to live. So, I mean, if we were in San Diego right now and I was looking to hire a medical physicist, I would probably get 100 applications. But there are areas of the country in the Midwest where you post it for a job and you say you want someone with an accredited degree in physics, and you want them to have residency training, you want them to be board eligible or board certified, and you're struggling to find applicants. So I've spoken to colleagues all over the country. It's pandemic. We just don't have enough medical physicists, and we're not training enough medical physicists. It's a shortage of residency training programs.
are there attempts currently to try and alleviate that problem in any manner?
We are trying to increase the number of residency programs. University of Toledo, we started one, it's about 7 or 8 years ago now, actually, that we started a residency program. And that was because we saw this coming. We already knew that there wasn't quite a big shortage back then, but we could see that this was going to happen. We were training graduate students that would need to go to residency, and there was just very few places for them to go. So we decided that to help our own students, we were going to create a residency program, and we were going to give preference to our own students so that we could then, our students could complete their training and then move on. So yeah, we've done our bit, but other programs are slowly catching on, and there is more residency programs opening up. But this problem's not going to go away probably for 10 years at the least. There are more people retiring than we are currently training, and that's not going to flip for a long time.
A little scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always hear in terms of primary care shortages being sort of a big issue currently.
True, yeah. Yep.
But it's unfortunate here that it's also affecting a lot of other fields too.
Yep.
Do you think it's just like the demographic changes between the generations in terms of, you know, the generation that's now entering retirement was just a larger population than the incoming one?
That's definitely parts of it, but I think there's also deeper issues that you can quite easily see that in the example that you gave of primary care, right? So why do we graduate maybe 170 medical students every year, and so they could very easily go into primary care, but they choose not to. And the reason they choose not to is because it doesn't pay as well as other competitive specialties. That's at least, and I'm not a physician, but I can see this, but I certainly wouldn't take my word for it entirely. But I think it's relatively well accepted that there is an issue with recruiting young physicians to go into primary care, to choose to go into a primary care residency program, knowing that the job on the other side of it may be not as well appreciated and also not as well paid. And so if they have the opportunity, and our medical students often do because the training at Toledo is amazing, they get the opportunity to go wherever they want. And so a lot of them will choose not to go into primary care. More than half of our students that graduate from UT's medical schools choose not to go into primary care, despite the fact that about 80% of the jobs that we need are in primary care.
Wow.
So the end result is that we actually tend to import physicians for primary care. There are physicians that are trained abroad or in Caribbean medical schools that they find it harder to get into specialties. They'll maybe also looking for an opportunity to get a visa here, and they have what we need, which is people that want to go into primary care. So they're alleviating some of the issues that we have because a lot of our own competitive medical students that are they're coming out of medical school with big medical debt to pay are choosing to go for the specialties that will pay them the largest salaries.
So, just real quick about the Caribbean schools. What's sort of some of the reason to why they're almost, what's the right word to use here? Less likely to get into certain residency programs, right? Because there is a bit of preference for in-state, in-nation residence medical schools, correct?
Yes. So students that choose to go to medical school have choices. So they can go to an MD program, they can go to a DO program, or they can go to a Caribbean medical school, which is, I think, an MD program. I think they're MD programs. There might be DOs. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not really an expert on the Caribbean medical schools, but I do know they exist. And I do know that, yes, as you said, there is less of a preference for students that went to school here. If they have the choice of where to go to medical school, they will choose to go to a medical school in the mainland U.S. rather than the Caribbean schools. There may be more students that would choose MD over DO, despite the fact that the differences between those degrees are very, very small, if anything, at this point. But the Caribbean schools, I have to be very careful about how I describe those programs, right? But from my understanding, and again, I'm not an expert on this. My understanding is that they tend to accept more students than they expect to graduate. That's not a philosophy that we have. We hope to graduate all of our students. So we accept about 175 new medical students each year into the MD program. And our goal is to graduate all 175. We don't have any catches where there's not enough clinical spaces for them, so we have to weed down the number. We have everything we need to train 175, and that's our goal. And we hope they all graduate, and the vast majority of them do. But in the Caribbean medical schools, again, maybe I'm just getting this from some misinformation, but from what I have heard from at least one student that's been through that track, they are trying to cut the students out. So they will show up for the first year of medical school, maybe pay all that tuition, but then not make it to the second year or not make it from the second year to the third year. So they have something and maybe again it's not all of them, maybe it's just one that I've heard of. They have a difficult time actually graduating. There's some obstacles in place, and when you're faced with things like that and still got high tuition but no guarantees that you're going to graduate, I think students are going to choose to go to a medical school where they know that the medical school wants to graduate them, as opposed to wanting to weed out some of them.
So something to be cautious about when considering.
I'd certainly look into it. I don't take my advice here. My specialty is kind of in admissions here in Toledo. I don't look too closely at what's going on in schools that we're not directly competing with. It's definitely something that if I was a student looking to go into medical school, I would do the research on that.
Good to know. Good to know. So then before we get into admissions, just to wrap up on some of the medical physics, what's kind of the new stuff happening in the field? Like what's the cutting edge?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's constantly evolving. I would say probably the big thing right now is called adaptive radiation therapy. I guess I'll pick that one. I guess as soon as I said that, I was like, oh, wait a minute, AI. AI is like really big as well. But we'll just pick one. So adaptive radiation therapy is a really cool idea that we are being able to successfully implement piece by piece. I mean, we're not like 100% there yet, but we're working in that direction. So the idea of adaptive radiation therapy is that every treatment that the patient gets is customized for that treatment day. So an example of why you might want to do that is, let's say you're treating a prostate. We can treat a prostate right now, no problem. But the prostate actually changes shape and moves around because it's directly above the rectum and kind of in front of the bladder. And so as those organs kind of like change shape and size, they push the prostate around and it changes location and shape slightly. With adaptive, you can actually reshape the dose distribution to match the current anatomy that you see. The way you're able to do that is you actually take imaging prior to the treatment, and then you run that through a program which takes the treatment plan that we've carefully designed for the patient based on the CT that we had acquired earlier and that the physician had drawn the contour of the cancer or the prostate. And then we've changed it for today's anatomy. And so that anatomy changes every day. So we're basically like, we're adapting the treatment for today's anatomy as opposed to trying to make it match the best we can.
So I imagine this is becoming like pretty much the norm in the field as of right now?
It isn't yet.
Not yet, okay.
It is, we're adapting only when needed right now. So like if we feel that a patient's cancer has grown or shrunk or shifted significantly enough, then we will adapt the treatment, but it's not happening on a day-to-day basis. But that could be the future if we're able to shift the treatment plan, change it rapidly. What will allow us to do that is computing power. That's why we are where we are now, is because it takes a lot of computational computing power to be able to calculate the dose on a patient's CT scan. We can do it using the systems we have. We have the best stuff in town here, and we can do it in a few minutes. But that's still not quick enough if the patient is lying on the treatment table. You want it to be done even faster. So that's the goal, and with some parallel processing, we're working in that direction. But the ideal situation would be every patient's treatment is adapted, maybe every time. I shouldn't say that's the ideal. Maybe I'm kind of overstating it, but for a lot of patients, that could be the norm in the future. That's probably the direction we're going in.
So as of right now, do you see better outcomes for patients than using this new technique?
It's new, so the outcome data isn't necessarily there yet. We have the technology to do it. We suspect it's the right thing to do, but because this technology is only just emerging, we don't have 5 years follow-up, 10 years follow-up. We don't have enough data to actually show that it's absolutely affecting quality of life of patients or affecting longevity. But we suspect that it will, and past experience with technologies that we've brought into radiation therapy suggests that this is something that's going to be useful and that it will help.
Good to know. Good to know. Hopefully that'll become more and more used. And then since it's a hot topic, you mentioned AI being implemented in the field. How is it being done, and what's sort of the future of that?
Yeah, it's getting into everything, right? So I'll give you one example, and this isn't specifically radiation therapy, but right now we have the ability to take a CT scan of a patient, feed it into a program that has been trained to identify all of the organs in the body and draw them. So as it stands right now, well, as it was a few years ago, I should say, we had to have someone draw every organ in the body. So if we're, again, going back to the example of the prostate, someone had to pick up a mouse and say, this is the bladder, this is a kidney, this is the rectum, this is the bowel, and actually draw those things using a mouse on every slice of the CT. And then we would be able to calculate how much dose those organs got. We're getting to the point where you'll probably be able to buy a new CT scanner. Maybe it's out now, maybe it's going to be a few years, but it's really close. And it will give you, once the CT is acquired, AI will identify all of the organs for us. And it will do a pretty decent job as long as the anatomy isn't really odd, right? So let's say you have a patient that only has one kidney. The AI is desperately trying to find the other kidney.
So it's still error prone.
It's definitely going to have problems with difficult cases. And that's where we will always be there to just check it all. In medicine, there will always be someone who's qualified that says, yeah, this is the right call. In radiology, that kind of technology can also be used to identify disease, right? So a CT scan could actually be run into AI, and the AI could start to try to guess what's wrong with the patient based on all of its training that it's had through putting in thousands, maybe millions of patients' medical records, all anonymized, but that information fed into a computer, and it sees thousands of millions of cases to compare to, and it can now figure out, okay, well, based on historically what decisions have been made, what prognosis, what diagnosis, this is what we're looking at, and it can do that based on the information that it gets. And, that it's not limited to imaging. It could be you feed in, it asks you some questions and you give it the answers, and basically you're doing a workup of the patient, and based on the answers to the questions, you put that information in there, and it's doing like diagnosis. It's figuring out all the different possible diagnoses. Once it's narrowed it down to maybe 5, it maybe says, okay, here's another question. Okay, I've narrowed it down to 3. Here's one more question. Okay, this is what the diagnosis is.
So pretty helpful.
I would say, yeah. I mean, I think we could be starting to get to the point where in the future, you could be walking around with your iPhone 25, and it's like maybe going to start diagnosing you. So, yeah.
Do you think that's so? 2 questions real quick. One sort of specific to that is, when you use large aggregated data sets like that, does it interfere with diagnosing very rare, kind of unicorn-like diseases in patients? Is that an issue that comes up frequently at all? Or?
I mean, there are a number of issues that AI is going to always struggle with, right. I think. Or at least we're definitely struggling with things like that now. There might be solutions in the future with enough data. Like once enough data has been put in, once there is enough of those cases been fed into the program, that it can learn to identify really rare things. But if you have a disease where only, let's say, 1 in a million patients, and it just so happens that none of the patients that you fed into the data set to train the computer have that, or if there is only 1, it's not going to be enough. So that's going to take some time, and there's going to be some problems.
So still working out the kinks.
Yeah, I think yes. And I think maybe there'll always be kinks, and maybe human intervention is always going to be required. Obviously, in medicine, there's a lot of rules in place. For example, you can't get a prescription unless it's by a physician, right? And you can't get a proper diagnosis unless it's signed off by a physician. And so, assuming that those rules are always in place, then all of these tools will only help, but they won't replace physicians. Or, in some cases, a lot of jobs in medicine will still need someone to actually check to make sure everything is correct. And then you might need less people, and maybe that will drive down the cost of healthcare because you'll need less input. But yeah, you'll still need somebody to check everything.
So will that be helpful with the physician and medical physicist shortage that we're seeing currently, do you think?
It might, given enough time. Physicists are definitely very well aware of this, and we're already kind of the people that are checking to make sure that the AI is doing the job correctly. So I don't see that it's going to affect physicists just yet. At least that doesn't seem to be a common prediction that the job of a medical physicist is going to disappear in the future because we will be replaced by AI. But I mean, that's maybe just short-sighted. Maybe we're looking at a long time in the future that might be possible. But I think we will always be there to make sure that the AI is doing the right thing.
Right. Yeah, I'm not too familiar in terms of the topic, but there is sort of the assumption that it'll continue to progress at the rate it currently is, and that might not be true.
I mean, we are still on the
Very beginning.
on the upwards trend, right?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of jobs that AI can do better than we can do, and only time will tell whether those, that's what will happen.
Mhm.
We might see, trucks on the road that are all driverless because they're being driven by AI programs. There might be some jobs that, I mean, there's always been advancement in replacing jobs with automation, and certain
Right,
jobs
yeah.
make more sense than others. So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be exciting. I think
Yep.
the future will be exciting to see what happens. All right, and then kind of transitioning into medical school admissions, since you are the Associate Dean of Admissions, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So I guess, like, how does the process work, right? Because you guys are sifting through thousands of applicants. Is it sort of algorithmic in how you are rating each metric and portfolio of a resume, and then looking at, the interview and how that does with each applicant?
It's surprisingly not algorithmic, actually.
Oh, really?
It's certainly true that it could be. Theoretically, and as a physicist, I think about these things. You could feed all the applications into a software program and say, well, find me all the applicants with this GPA, this MCAT, this number of hours of experience, something like that. It's doable. You could do that, but we don't, and we actively choose not to. We actually have different opinions on the admissions committee. Some people think that maybe community service is the most important, and some people think research is the most important, and we actually value those different opinions. And a computer program would get rid of all that. It would be, there is only one correct answer. There is only one right decision, but we definitely value different people's opinions. So, yeah, to give you some idea of the process, yeah, we get a large number of applications. It's currently about 6,000. One thing that might make your audience feel better is that actually it's only approximately 1,000 to 1,200 people from Ohio, and that's a big deal because traditionally, over the last few years, about 65 to 70% of our class of medical school accepted students is Ohioans, right? So you've got 1,000 people looking to fill 70% of the class, and you've got 5,000 people remaining from all states other than Ohio that are looking to fill in the last 30% of the class. So you can do the math there. The statistics for being from Ohio is massive. You're just not competing with anywhere near as many applicants as if you're from out of state. So that's a big thing, and that's not unique to Toledo. A lot of the schools in Ohio, the publicly funded schools that get some money from the state, will give preference in some degree to Ohio students. So for OSU, it might be like 50% of the classes from Ohio. And then you've got, Neomeds, Wright State, Cincinnati, Toledo. We're all state-funded schools, and we all give preference to Ohioans. So that makes a big deal. There's a lot of schools in Ohio to choose from, medical schools that you can go to. And by my estimation, there's only about 1,000 to 1,200 qualified applicants that are being seriously considered for those positions.
Yeah, I think Ohio is unique in that aspect because of the high density of medical schools in the state. Right? You look
Yeah.
at Colorado, and there's one MD program in the entire state.
Yeah, and there's some states that have none, right?
Mhm.
I don't think there's any in the Dakotas. Right? So there's certain big areas of the country where if you grew up in that area, you're looking to travel somewhere else to go to medical school. But that's certainly not the case in Ohio. Best chance of being accepted into medical school in Ohio, being from Ohio, or even being from Ohio, maybe not even going to a school in Ohio, is still to actually come back to Ohio or be in Ohio for med school.
So, is the thinking behind that to invest in the future physician workforce in Ohio?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, as we talked about earlier, there's a physician shortage, and we need to look after ourselves, right? So we want to train physicians that are most likely going to help us in the future, right? I'm going to need a physician, right? So we all need physicians here, and so we put ourselves first. We want to train physicians that are most likely going to stay here in Ohio. And who are those people? There are people that have family here, that have reasons to stay here.
Right. I think I believe it's even in UTCOM's mission statement about serving
Absolutely, it is. Yeah.
Northwest Ohio and the Greater Ohio region. So it's very crucial to the school.
Mhm. Yeah, and I was just talking about Ohio. We didn't even mention, that how it improves your odds to be from Northwest Ohio. So if you're applying to University of Toledo specifically, it increases your probability of being accepted is if you're from Northwest Ohio, or if you're from University of Toledo. Of course, that's just us. Other schools wouldn't necessarily. I mean, Cincinnati isn't going to isn't going to look highly on people from Northwest Ohio, but they're going to look at their own communities. So we're all looking at our own local communities with the hope that we will be training a future workforce that will work in our area.
So very important to consider when applying.
And
So-
it's not the end all be all.
Right,
We are accepting people from all over the place. We know that if we graduated 175 physicians and they all stayed in Toledo, that would be amazing, but we wouldn't be able to do it forever. The jobs would disappear. So we are exporting. Ohio is probably exporting physicians at this point. We're probably training more than we need, but that might not always be the case, and it's great to have that resource available if we need the physicians here, we will be able to pull on our own, the students that we've trained.
So, in terms of physician shortages, are medical schools looking to expand their current cohort sizes at all?
There are new medical schools popping up. There's discussion right now of a new school in Cincinnati. I think there was a new school in Michigan opened up a few years ago. So there are new medical schools opening rather than expanding the existing classes. But that doesn't necessarily solve the problem unless the number of residency programs also increases. And that requires federal funding. And you might be aware of the fact that federal funding is pretty difficult to get. So unless the U.S. government actually focuses some money towards medical education, then us increasing the number of medical schools isn't actually going to be a real solution. It would train more medical students, but then if there's no residency positions, what are they going to do? They need residency positions. I mean, thankfully, there are enough residency positions for our graduates, but there wouldn't necessarily be if we just keep increasing the number of medical schools, but without increasing the number of residencies.
So it's a very multifaceted approach that sort of needs to be undertaken.
Yeah, yeah. You have to build up every step of the pipeline. Otherwise, there's going to be bottlenecks. And right now, I think residency could be a bottleneck. It isn't negatively affecting our students, thankfully. But we talked about students that come from maybe less competitive schools. If there's only a limited number of residency positions and they're giving them to MD students from really good schools, DO students from really good schools, and then they're looking at international graduates last, then yeah, you could have a shortage of residency programs.
Right. So then you mentioned sort of the admissions council or board considering multiple aspects of a student's portfolio, and I think community and service and research were sort of put out there. Are they equally valued? Is there preference for one or the other, or is there are there other extracurriculars also that are sort of desired?
I think this is maybe a little bit school specific. So I will say that at Toledo we focus a lot on community service, right? So we are looking for people who meet our mission to serve the local community. So a history of service is very important to us. We like to see students with research, but we also are aware that not all students that go to med school have the opportunity to do research. And so it's not an absolute requirement. We'd like to see it, but we also know it's not obtainable for everybody. We also look at medical experience. So how has a applicant done at least made some effort to spend some time with current physicians to see what the job is like. But on the flip side, we also know that alone is not going to show that they know what the job of a physician is like. It'll give them some idea, but it's not going to show them everything they need to know about being a physician. So yeah, we're looking at all things. We're looking at the academics. We want to make sure that everybody that goes into medical school has the ability to graduate from medical school. I think it's well known that it's not easy in medical school. I was just talking the other day about the number of credit hours, for example. So in a typical semester, a medical student is doing maybe 3 times the number of credit hours, and they're all in like tough sciences. So you're doing, in the first year or 2 of medical school, you're taking lots of tough courses all simultaneously. There's no escape. So it's difficult. So we need students that did very well in undergraduate because the next step is going to be harder and it's going to be more of a challenge. So we don't want to put someone into medical school that we don't think is going to make it academically for 2 reasons. One is that those seats are precious. If we put someone in medical school and they don't graduate, that's one less physician in the workforce that we can't afford. And on top of that, if you accept students that don't have the academic abilities, then you're just setting them up for debt, lots and lots of debt. So medical school is expensive. There are not a lot of scholarships. Most of the cost of medical school is through student loans. And if someone has to drop out of medical school after 1 or 2 years, then that's a lot of debt that they've racked up that they may not be able to ever pay off without the decent salaries that physicians have. So yeah, that's why we look at those things. But we're not focused on it. We're not like, I think we've successfully changed the mindset that higher is better. I think we're getting to the point where the admissions committee accepts or realizes that there is a minimum, and then above the minimum is not necessarily important. So there's probably some minimum GPA and MCAT that someone needs to succeed, and being way smarter than that doesn't help being a good physician. You need to have the academics and also the interpersonal skills. It's not one or the other.
So being well-rounded.
Yes, yeah, being well-rounded, yeah. And there's actually, interestingly, there's data that shows that people that have the highest MCAT scores and GPAs actually do worse in medical school.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh,
It has to get really high. But once you actually get to kind of genius level of test scores, they actually start to could statistically do worse in med school. So there's a happy medium. And the obvious question would be, what is it, right? What is the minimum MCAT score and GPA? And the fact is, we don't really know. We know that there are some students that have lower GPAs and MCATs than we're comfortable with who do great. They have the motivation, they have the willpower, they have the drive to just pull it all together and do well in med school. But not everybody does, and so there is no one minimum MCAT and GPA combination that is just guaranteed to make everybody fly through medical school in 4 years.
So would you say it's important for students not to be discouraged if maybe they're at the average or a little bit below the average in terms of those metrics?
In terms of metrics for our school, absolutely, being average is totally fine. So our average MCAT is about 75 to 80th percentile. It's about 510. And our average GPA of our students is 3.7. So if someone has those metrics, they don't have anything to worry about, if they're well-rounded. If the question is when you start to get quite far from those numbers, right? So 510 MCAT is the average for our class. What about 500? That's only 10 points different. Well, it's like a 50th percentile instead of an 80th percentile. And that does correspond, the data shows us that does correspond to an increased risk that they will not make it through medical school in 4 years. So they may drop out, or they may need to repeat a year.
Gotcha. So then also I'm going to have you just pull that mic just a little bit closer for me. Sorry. I just want to make sure the audio's not clipping out or anything on you.
Yeah, good.
So then is each applicant sort of considered individually in terms of what their portfolio has, right?
Yes.
Not sort of this checkbox mentality of, research community, this or that, but kind of everyone's unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let me tell you about the process. So we have an admissions committee that is about 70 people, and we have a group on that committee that has been on the committee for years and have seen thousands of med school applications. And this small group, it's about 5 to 10, is assigned the task of finding people to interview. And that is probably the most important job especially from an applicant's point of view, because the hardest barrier to getting into medical school is getting that interview. We only interview around 400 applicants a year, and our admissions committee tends to like most of them, meaning once you have an interview, the odds that you'll be accepted are better than 50-50. However, the odds of getting an interview are way less than that. So again, we talked about being from Ohio helps a lot. Having a good academic profile, having a well-rounded application, those all increase people's odds of getting an interview. But it's still not guaranteed. It's not like there's, every single person that has decent GPA and MCAT and experience is getting an interview, just because there's just not enough interview spots available for us to be able to do that, or for any med school to be able to do that. And so we have a group of dedicated people who review the applications, and what they're looking for is the well-rounded application. They don't have time to necessarily read through letters of recommendation at this stage to decide whether they're going to get an interview. They don't necessarily look at the personal statement in great detail, but they're looking at the big picture. They're looking at the experiences. They're looking at MCAT, GPA combination, history of success in tough academic courses. And they're putting that all together to try to figure out whether we should make that person an interview offer. And again, that's the big thing. If someone gets an interview, there's a good chance that they will be accepted, because those people they know what to look for. Then basically the next thing is, do they have the ability to succeed in our interview process? Our interviews, I wouldn't say they're tough. They're not designed to be very difficult interviews, but they are obviously designed to make people think. So we actually, all of our applicants get eight interviews with 8 different people, with 8 different questions. And so we present all of our applicants that we interview with 8 different scenarios, and they have to work their way through those scenarios, explaining their thought process, talking about difficult situations, explaining what they would do and why to someone. And they're short interviews. They only have to talk for maybe 5 to 10 minutes about a subject that we ask them to talk about. And then once they've done that, they move on to the next interview. So then once we've done that, we've got information about communication skills, interpersonal skills, all the soft skills that we're looking for in a good physician. A lot of that we get from the interviews, and then we combine that information with their written portfolio, their AMCAS application, and the admissions committee then gets all of that information. So we send the interview scores and the full application to the admissions committee, and we assign every applicant that we've interviewed to 5 people on the admissions committee. Each of those 5 people individually reviews the application and the interview scores, and then votes to make an accept recommendation or an alternate list recommendation. And the majority rule of the 5 is the ultimate recommendation. So if 3 out of 5 people on this committee say yes, then we have our recommendation. That recommendation then gets ratified by everybody on the committee. So now we have, again, 70 people. They all get to say their piece. And if the majority agree with that decision, then the applicant gets sent an offer letter. So you can see it's a lot, right? And it takes a while. From the time that someone is sending in an application, their application has to be screened, read through, decide whether they're going to get an interview. Then once they've got an interview, schedule the interviews, do the interviews, then all of that information, interview scores and AMCAS application gets sent to the committee. Committee deliberates in small groups, then passes a recommendation, and that recommendation is ratified. So there's a lot of people involved. Up to 70 people are voting on one applicant, and we're doing that 400 times because we're interviewing about 400 people.
So it's very multi-layered.
Yes.
You have all these different
it's not,
groups.
If someone gets accepted into medical school, it doesn't look, right? Mm-hmm. It means that a small group has looked at that application and decided they were worth a shot for an interview. And then 5 more people have decided that they were worth making an offer to. And then a group of 70 people has ratified that decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how are the interviews scored? Because you mentioned that there's like a score involved that the secondary sort of committee that's evaluating the group of 5 is looking at.
So it's a 1 to 10 scale,
mm-hmm.
and the admissions interviewers. So I talked about how we have like 70 people on the admissions committee. We actually have over 200 people involved in the interview process. Not every day, but we split up the workload so that it spreads the work around, because it's a lot of interviewing medical students is a lot of work. It's a 2-hour commitment just to interview one group on one day, and we have multiple interview days throughout the year. But yeah, they are looking for specific. I wouldn't say there's like a right answer to our questions. We ask a question, they're open-ended, they're difficult scenarios, there's no right or wrong answer, but the admissions interviewers are given points to look for. Did the applicant cover this? Did they think about this? Did they discuss this as a difficult issue? They're looking for specific things. And so it's very fair because it's not entirely down to the interviewer's training or mood, right? They're actually given suggestions on what to look for. And so it doesn't really matter who interviews the applicant. Every applicant gets interviewed by someone or 8 people, but each of them is being given, each of the interviewers has been given a set list of criteria that they should be basing their score off.
So a rubric is involved for the whole process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For the interview portion, yes.
Right. And then UTCOM does offer some different admissions programs like MedStart and Back to MD.
Yeah.
Should we just mention those real quick, I guess?
Yeah. So the Back to MD program is a special program just for UT students. It is a pathway where during the junior year of medical school, you get to apply a year before would be normal, right? So most pre-meds apply towards the end of the junior year, beginning of senior year. I mean, obviously it's a long process, but they start submitting their applications around that time. The Back to MD program does all of that 1 year sooner. And so the interviews are done sooner. The decisions are made a year sooner. It gives UT students an opportunity to get an offer to Toledo. And if it works out, great, they get to go to Toledo's med school. But if it doesn't, they still have plenty of time to apply through the regular pathway to all the other schools in the country. So it definitely gives our students an advantage. We have GPA requirements. We have like a rather low MCAT requirement. But we do have for that program SAT and ACT requirements. So to be in that program, they have to apply straight out of high school. And if they're accepted based on their academics, then they need to pass all of their classes with at least, I think it's a 3.5 GPA. I'd have to check the website. But they have to go through all of UT maintaining a certain GPA, then take the MCAT. They don't have to do super well on the MCAT, but they have to do a reasonable score on the MCAT. And then they get an interview. And so anyone that's in the Back to MD program that meets those requirements, we guarantee an interview. And so that, again, we talked about how getting that interview is the toughest part about getting accepted into med school. Decent odds of being accepted once you've been interviewed, but the real difficulty is getting your foot in the door to get that interview. So this gives you that guarantee of the interview for Toledo. So that's Back to MD. That program's been running for a number of years. It's been tweaked over the years to better meet the needs of the community. So that's Back to MD. The other program that we have that's kind of special is MedStart. MedStart is similar and also different from Back to MD. MedStart is open to applicants from all around the country. And the goal of the MedStart program is actually to recruit medical students that would often not consider Toledo as a medical school. We're looking for some of the best undergrad students from any school in the country. And we're able to recruit them to come to Toledo's med school when they may otherwise not apply to Toledo's med school. We're able to do that by, offering, like the Back to MD, we're offering them the early decision. We're offering them an opportunity to apply 1 year sooner, get a decision 1 year sooner. And if they get accepted, great. They've got a guaranteed position in med school at Toledo. If they don't get accepted, well, okay, you've done a good job practicing your application process, maybe getting an interview. You've learned a lot of things, and then they get to apply to all the other med schools in the country. And again, they've got time to do that because the decision is made before the application deadlines for AMCAS.
So would you say that both of these programs are more so focused in drawing, again, like you said, high caliber students from other colleges that normally wouldn't consider
I would say, Back to MD is a UT specific program,
back
right?
to
So it's
right,
it's giving UT students an advantage, this guaranteed interview at Toledo's med school. Even though the process is very similar, the kind of class profile that we're looking for the MedStart is a little bit different. We have students from UT that do go through that pathway, but it's not a large number because we're opening the net to all applicants from all over the country. So we'll get students that they're currently at Yale, currently at Brown, Harvard, MIT. They're at pre-meds at some very prestigious schools, and they're doing really well. And we're offering them an interview, hoping that that carrot on the stick of that guaranteed interview and decision early will recruit them here, and it works. We have it's a small program, so we maybe get 15 to 20 students. It's actually more like 10 to 20 students per year that go through the MedStart program. So it's not a big chunk of our class. But the students that we do get are exceptional. And I'm quite sure that for a lot of those students, if we didn't have that carrot on the stick of applying early, they probably would have graduated from those prestigious schools with excellent GPAs, and they would never have applied to Toledo's med school because they would be going to kind of like Ivy League places.
So it's a great way to sort of bolster
Yeah.
the cohorts.
Yeah, yeah. So that's been a really successful program. I think we're all pretty happy with how that program has panned out over the years and the quality of the students that we've been able to recruit to Toledo. But it is a small program, and it's never been designed to kind of like replace any of all the 175 seats in the class. It's a relatively small percentage.
Gotcha. And then one also important note for Back to MD, in case there's any listeners who are familiar with it, the old program used to allow sort of an exception to the MCAT, which is
Yeah.
no longer the case anymore.
That is true. So students that are in the Back to MD right now, if they're juniors, then they were part of, they're grandfathered in, right? They're a
Yes.
part of they were accepted to Toledo under the original Back to MD rules. What was happening was we were starting to get, that program was becoming very popular, and more students were coming to Toledo because of the program, coming to the undergraduate campus, and we were guaranteeing those interviews if they maintained the GPA requirements. And what was happening was we were guaranteeing more interviews than we could actually do. So there is a limited number of interviews positions we have, and if the Back to MD program gets super popular without becoming more competitive, then the interview spaces get filled up by just one cohort of students, and our class would become essentially a University of Toledo med school class with just University of Toledo students. And so we've always wanted the university to be more diverse than that, to have students from programs from all over the place. And so that was becoming a bit problematic. We were seeing that it was getting higher and higher every year. So we wanted to make the program competitive. We wanted students that are in the Back to MD program to be like, wow, I'm in the Back to MD program, and that means a lot, right? So in order to do that, to make it kind of like up there with MedStart in terms of prestige, we wanted to add that MCAT requirement and make it just a bit, essentially make it harder to get accepted into that. Because if you make it harder to get accepted, then it becomes prestigious, right?
Right. The other thing I sort of heard, I don't know if you could corroborate on this, I'm sort of reiterating in past episodes, is that there was also those who got into the Back to MD program decided not to take the MCAT were seen to have, on average, statistically lower Step 1 and Step 2 scores. Well, Step 2, I guess, because Step 1 is now pass or fail.
Yeah, that was definitely another thing that we took into account. So we did some research that looked at 3 med school classes. It was the last 3 classes that actually had Step 1 scores. So Step 1 is now doesn't have a score, it's
Right.
pass fail. But for the 3 years of med school classes where there was a score, we were able to look at like students coming into med school, looking at their MCAT, looking at the GPA, what school they came in from, what program they came in from, and then correlate that to their success on Step 1, which obviously Step 1 Step 1 score correlated pretty well to their success getting into really competitive residencies. So that was the goal of the study. And what we found was that Back to MD students, not Toledo students, Back to MD specifically, were not doing as well as the average in the class on the Step 1. And that kind of caused us to scratch our heads, because we were like, well, they're going through exactly the same undergraduate pathway to medical school as the UToledo students that didn't go Back to MD have exactly the same classes. They're going to see Professor so-and-so, they're doing organic chemistry, they're doing physics here. If they're going to the same classes and coming out with the same GPA, why would they not also do the same in med school? They should have the same academic abilities, right? They should be able to succeed on the Step 1. But as a group, the Back to MD students that did not have an MCAT, and that was it. That was the only difference, right? The Back to MD students didn't have an MCAT. They didn't have an MCAT, and they also had more guarantees of success going into medical school, getting accepted into med school. We suspect that caused them to not try as hard to get into med school, but we don't know that for sure. What we do know for sure is that we had two groups of students, both UT graduates, 3 years of data. The back to MD students were not doing as well as the non-back to MD students that were graduating from University of Toledo. So that made us think that there is something that we needed to do to, obviously we don't want students to think that the back to MD program is, a pathway to failing med school or to not doing well on the exams. So that was another reason for us to want to make the program competitive again, to make it prestigious. And so, adding the MCAT score was one of the things that we thought would give students the best chance of succeeding in med school, because again, the UT students that had taken the MCAT they were doing great. They were doing just fine. So they had no trouble getting through med school. And again, not to say the back to MD students they were passing, The 175th student in our class gets to still be a doctor, right? But they weren't doing as well. And we saw that as being something that we should try to do something about. So that was part of the reason for the implementation of the stricter, harder to get into back to MD. It makes the program slightly smaller. There's less back to MD students now in the first year than there was 2, 3, 4 years ago. But they're a super competitive bunch. We have no problem. We have no doubts that they won't be super successful in med school.
So you think the standardized testing sort of the MCAT prepares you for the standardized testing that you'll see in medical school?
That's our theory, yeah. And, there is lots of national data that shows that, if you can do well on one big national standardized test, you should be able to do well on all of them, right? So if you can do well, if you have the ability to do really well on the MCAT, you should have the ability to do really well on the board exams, all things being equal. But if you've never taken the MCAT and then the first big hurdle that you come across is this massive, 5, 6, 7 hour exam. I'm not even sure how long it is. It's an ordeal. You get to that exam and that's the first time you've ever taken a big medical standardized test, then that could be a problem. Like you might find out that, that I can't do that. And being 2 years into med school is not the time to figure out that you can't do board exams.
Right, because those are kind of going to carry with you throughout your career.
Right.
And they're important for residency determination and all that.
And unlike the MCAT, you can take it multiple times. And a lot of med schools will just take your best attempt. That's not necessarily true with STEP. Right? If you didn't pass it first time, you were looking at some issues like maybe having to repeat a year. If you didn't pass it really well, taking it a second time was not going to make you just amazingly competitive for for really competitive specialty like neurosurgery. They were good. That neurosurgery was going to look at all of your scores,
right? And
if the first one wasn't that great, then you're not going to be a neurosurgeon.
Yeah, a little scary. So then, before we wrap up, I would like to talk about the new radiation therapy bachelor's program that's here on campus. This is really new, right? The first cohort is just this fall.
Yeah, this is brand new. So this is something we've been working on now for a few years. We got final approval to start the program and start recruiting students into that program at the beginning of this academic year. And so it's exciting that we have new students coming through. And this is the reason we wanted to do this was that we saw an issue. We saw that here at Toledo, we have the Dana Cancer Center, and we employ 6, 7 radiation therapists. And when they retire, we knew that there was going to be a difficulty hiring people to take their positions because nationally there was a shortage of radiation therapists. So kind of similar to what we talked about with the medical physics, it was going to become an issue. So on top of that, the closest program to us closed. So Baker College in Ann Arbor, their campus had a radiation therapy program, and Baker College decided to restructure their school. So they decided that all of the medical-related degree programs would move to one single campus, and it wasn't the Ann Arbor campus. And the people that ran that program said, we can't do that. All of our students need to go to radiation therapy clinics for training, and we have agreements with clinics around here. We can't just move to the other side of the state and then rebuild all those connections with local clinics so that our students can get training. So they said, okay, well, that's it then. That's the end of the program. So they closed the program. We got wind of that, thankfully, through our connections in the community, that they were going to do that in enough time that we started immediately working on a program, because a lot of our radiation therapists in this area, not just at Toledo, not just at the University of Toledo, but Flower Hospital, Mercy, Perrysburg, they need to hire radiation therapists to treat cancer patients, and they all are going to struggle to hire. People don't want to move from California, so you need to train people that grew up here, and so that was the emphasis that was the focus for getting this program off the ground. So we got that program off the ground. It's looking great. 4 years from now, we're going to graduate. Well, actually, it's not necessarily 4 years. So if students did all the prereqs for the clinical curriculum early on, they could actually come into the third year directly. But yeah, maybe 1, 2, 3 years from now, we'll be starting to graduate new radiation therapists in this area, and there's going to be jobs for them, and they're well-paid jobs. Nationally, the average salary for a radiation therapist is $99,000. That's very decent for a degree, an undergraduate degree program, right? So they can come out of this radiation therapy program, get a job immediately, they don't need to go to residency, they don't need to take any additional training programs. They can come straight from UT's training program, 4-year degree, straight into a job, and start earning really good money straight off the bat. Another advantage of radiation therapy is that it is an outpatient clinic, meaning that our treatments are kind of like 8 to 5. We don't do a lot of emergency treatments of the weekend, so radiation therapists are not necessarily expected to do lots of call work where they're going to have to come in late, early weekends. So yeah, it's a great lifestyle. It's great money. I think it's very rewarding, and so it's a great opportunity that we've got that new degree program here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that sort of clinical interaction with patients, something that's not always, featured in every single healthcare specialty.
Yeah.
Is this unique to UT in terms of solely just an undergraduate, and then you can be accredited and go straight into the workforce?
No, that's the accreditation pathway.
Okay.
That you have to do. You have to have a 4-year degree from an accredited radiation therapy program, and the next nearest program to us is Kent State, and then after that, OSU. I think Wayne State in Michigan has one. So Northwest Ohio, none. There are no competing schools. You'd have to go to either Detroit or Wayne. Or there's 2 other programs within Ohio. So yeah, we're not talking about a lot of places that you can do this training program. So to have one in Toledo is really exciting.
And then the structure is almost didactic, right? You do like the first 2 years just doing regular kind of prerequisite classwork, and then depending on how you structure it individually as a student, then you do your clinicals.
Yeah, it's kind of interestingly, it's like medical school. It's
Right.
2 years of classes and then 2 years of clinic. There's some crossover in there, but some classes that you still take later on. But yeah, there's 2 years of undergraduate standard stuff. Like, we require students to have 1 physics class and anatomy and physiology. There's a bunch of prerequisite classes that all of the students have to take before they can be eligible for the actual clinical training portion. So yeah, it's a 4-year degree, but it's essentially 2 years and 2 years. And the real part of the radiation therapy specific training gets done in the second 2 years, where they take special classes for radiation therapy.
So then once you graduate, is there licensing that needs to be undertaken by the student?
Yes. The training that we provide is basically towards a board exam. And so the students will graduate and then they will be eligible to take the board exam. And of course, this program is preparing them for that. So being an accredited program means that they're able to take that board exam straight after graduation.
And then is there like for the board exam, do you have to renew it every so often, or is it kind of a lifetime?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So it is a lifetime qualification with the caveat that everybody in medicine has to do continuing medical education.
right.
So we all have to do our part to keep up to date with the latest techniques and treatments. So what that means for radiation therapists is they're expected to have that license for life, but they will have to do some online sessions, watch a video, answer some questions, read an article, answer some questions. There's some little bit of testing, but it's not like you have to go to a test center and take a big exam every few years. It's continual education. That's kind of low stress, low pressure, because you can just keep doing it. And if you're struggling, you've got time to figure it out. No one's going to be knocking on your door saying, okay, if you don't finish this week, we've only given you a week to think about this. If you don't pass, then you're out. You've got this constant testing.
So it seems like a great career because you mentioned outpatient, so you can have a nice work-life balance.
Yeah.
You have clinical patient interactions. I mean, sort of has a lot of what draws people to medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it is in its own way. It's also unique. So it's quite technical. So difference between being a radiation therapist and being a nurse, for example. So radiation therapists, their job is to use very expensive equipment every day. So we have linear accelerators that cost multiple millions of dollars that can image patients, produce large amounts of radiation. They are trained to make sure the patient is in exactly the right position prior to treatment. And then they use a control panel to actually activate the machine, load up the correct patient's treatment, safely treat the patient. So there's the technical side of it, and they don't have to be experts in medicine. So they don't necessarily they're not involved in helping to diagnose the patient like maybe a physician assistant or a nurse would be. They're not necessarily needing to like draw blood or clean up messy things as much. There is, some radiation therapists will actually do contrast for CT, but it's not all of them. So it's there's some option to if you like can't stand the sight of blood, you could still be a radiation therapist. If you don't want to deal with like being in an operating room and seeing patients open up, that's okay. You can be a radiation therapist.
Yeah, sounds like a great career pathway for someone who is, interested in medicine, but maybe doesn't want to get involved in the surgical side, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of what attracted me towards the field of radiation therapy was some people ask me why I didn't become a physician, and I don't really like the sight of blood, for one thing. Mm-hmm. And watching TV, as a kid, I always thought there's just one type of physician, and they deal with blood and patients that are opened up on the operating table, and that didn't appeal to me at all. So I kind of ruled out medicine early on. Only later did I find out that there are fields like radiation therapy where you can be in medicine and not like those things, and there's still a place.
Yeah, I mean that's what's great about sort of access to the internet and whatnot. People have the ability to explore all these different fields and occupations and be able to actually choose one.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't know about radiation therapy.
Right. It's pretty specialized.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about the fact that I was a couple of years into my PhD before I even knew about my field. So yeah, it's okay to not know about these things. I don't think, a lot of us don't necessarily grow up thinking, oh my gosh, I want to become a radiation oncologist or a radiation therapist or a medical physicist in radiation. There's no exposure to it. You have to know someone or stumble across something on the internet about it. Otherwise, how would you know? Like all these fields exist.
Again, going back to the shortage aspect that kind of is a recurring theme that we have going on. Do you think better advertising of these fields could also
Yeah.
Maybe
Yep.
improve it?
Uh, Very early on in the radiation therapy program, we worked to make a website that would be educational and give people real information. Um, but a lot of information needs to come from something more like social media to at least direct you towards the website, and that's not that prevalent. You'd have to. I mean, there's just so many like channels and
Very
feeds.
saturated, yeah.
Yeah, that you're not going to just bump into it. So still, something has to send you in the right direction. So yeah, more advertising, but um, I don't know. I think it's okay to be a special secret, a little secret that a little secret in Toledo that we have that not everybody knows about it.
Hmm. So then before we wrap up, just like one last question would be, what would be some like major pieces of advice you'd give someone who's wanting to pursue a career in medical physics?
I think if you know about medical physics and it's what you want to do, then don't let anything stop you. Um, I often get asked like, what do you need to do to stand out? And the answer is you kind of don't have to do anything to stand out. You just have to be, first of all, you have to know about the field of what you want to do, and that this is true of like medicine as well. But just knowing about it is half of the battle, and then setting your mind to, okay, now you've got a goal in front of you. This is what you want to do, right? I think 4 years of school is difficult if you don't have a goal of working to work towards. Some people can, right? Some people can go to school and not have a goal and come out the other side and do just fine. But even they would probably do better if they did have a goal to work towards. So I think, if you know about a career path like medical physics and that's what you're working towards, then it's very achievable. Now, of course, for medical physics, you have to be decent at physics. That's probably the biggest hurdle. But of course, if you're interested in medical physics, it's a good chance it's because you do enjoy physics. That doesn't mean you have to be an expert at it, right? So, toughest classes I had to take were quantum mechanics and electromagnetism and classical mechanics, and I don't use all of that stuff on a daily basis. Um, I use a tiny fraction of it. The reason we took those things was to prove that we can, and we can solve problems, and we can do difficult things. Um, doesn't mean doesn't mean that being a physicist is going to be to use those difficult things every day. If our job was that hard, we would make a lot of mistakes. We would wake up tired one day and like mistreat patients because we couldn't solve Schrodinger's equation in our head in like 5 seconds. So the job difficult jobs actually have to be reasonably simple, otherwise mistakes would happen all the time. So it's not that hard. You're not using all this physics stuff all the time. You just have to be organized.
Yeah, I mean, another aspect to I feel like people always say, like, why do I need to take math in high school and all this types? I mean, it does exercise your logic and reasoning skills,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a certain aspect to that. I mean, of course, you're dealing with very advanced studies in terms of quantum mechanics.
If you can do the hard math, then the simple stuff becomes super simple, right?
Yeah.
If you've done like a PhD in math, then if you look back at freshman math, you're going to be like, wow, this is really easy. And that's the trick, right? You have to get to the point where you're studying stuff that's hard enough that the day-to-day stuff becomes super simple. And I think that's probably true in many, many fields.
Oh, yeah. Constantly challenging yourself with more difficult material all
Yeah.
the time, yeah. All right. So I think we're about an hour and a half. So was there anything else that I missed that you wanted to cover real quick, or
I don't think so. No.
pretty
we got there.
comprehensive?
Yeah.
All right. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, this was a pleasure. I think a fantastic episode, a lot of depth of content. And well, hopefully we'll have you on sometime again too.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. Happy to be here.
Yeah, again, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.